Lohrentz. I'm the Director of the Inclusive Business Initiative with the Insight Center for Community Economic Development in Oakland, California. And we are very happy to present today an hour-long webinar on a trip report back from Washington State's Supplier Diversity Program. And just a few logistical things before we get started. I would encourage everyone to use, if you plan on speaking later, to use the telephone dial-in system rather than your computer's mic and speakers. It's just a better quality and we get less feedback that way. And you should be seeing a hand next to your name where you can raise the hand if you have a question. There should also be a tab for questions, and if you do have questions later on or during the presentation, you can use the question tab, and we can ask a question for you. If you raise your hand, I can unmute your mic, and then that way you can ask the question directly yourself. So that's sort of the preferred way of asking a question or making a comment, and we'll have time for that. So first we're going to be hearing from Cathy Canorro, who's the Director of the Office of Minority and Women's Business Enterprise for the state of Washington, and she'll be presenting about a 15-minute presentation on their program in Washington State, and that will be followed by a series of questions for three local officials, practitioners of minority and women business enterprise from the state of California who made a trip up to Washington State earlier this month. And I will introduce them here in a second. And then after that, there will be time for questions and comments from the audience at large, and any of the panelists or presenters can respond to that. So the Insight Center sponsored a trip to Olympia, Washington. We also spent the afternoon at the SeaTac airport. But we were meeting with state officials as well as local government officials and partners in Washington for their supplier diversity program. And it was meant to be, or it was a way that local government programs and directors can learn about Washington Supplier Diversity Program. Both California and Washington, as we will hear, have similar policy restrictions through ballot measures, Proposition 209 in California and Initiative 200 in Washington, where they restrict the state and local governments from any type of preferences in relation to higher education, government employment, and government purchasing and contracting. And so a lot of options left for local governments when it comes to purchasing and contracting, but there are some, and that's what this trip was all about, is to learn about what Washington State did with its supplier diversity program. So let me introduce now the panelists from California who will be speaking after Cathy's presentation. We have Kecia Washington, who's the Managing Director of the Office of Economic and Business Policy in the City of Los Angeles Office of the Mayor. Debra Fischle-Faulk, Director of Administration, also Office of the Mayor, in her case the City of San Diego. And Andrew Houston, who's the Contracts Compliance Officer with the Human Rights Commission for the City County of San Francisco. So welcome to all of you. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Cathy Canorro, who's, as I mentioned, the Director of the Office of Minority and Women Business Enterprise for Washington, to talk about the supplier diversity program there. So first, I just need to unmute you, Cathy, and then you can begin. Okay.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Tim. And on behalf of OMWBE, I really appreciate the opportunity to have this follow-up dialogue with our colleagues in California and maybe in some other jurisdictions, and hopefully we'll get to know who is all participating in this conversation today. Let me first of all say that the visit on March 6th was really a sharing between California and Washington, and our program officials from the local jurisdiction and at the state level, I think, came away with many aha moments, and so they so appreciated the opportunity to meet and learn from Debra and Kecia, Andrew, and then also Beverly Johnson and Bernita Reagan. So thank you to Tim for organizing this event for the state of Washington. Actually, it was really a very collaborative event, and hopefully we can do something like this in the future with other states and jurisdictions. It's really very beneficial, and we've had some follow-up where our representative from the University of Washington is communicating with other universities in other states, and that is just the kind of networking that we hope will flow from these kinds of events. So with that being said, let's move right into this presentation, which frankly, because we were so caught up in the moment on March 6th, we really didn't have much time to go through because we were so interested in learning from each other. But as Tim alluded to, we in the state of Washington were faced in December of 1998 with implementing what is now known as supplier diversity after the passage of Initiative 200. And so that was where we're going to start with, and this is what my presentation here is going to give you an overview of, hopefully, here in the brief moments that I have. We're going to look a little bit about the state's Minority and Women Business Program before the passage of Initiative 200, and then what Initiative 200 did and did not do, and then the fundamentals of Washington's current supplier diversity program. So we have to start first about what is the mission of the Office of Minority and Women's Business Enterprise. We are a state agency. That's critical because that means we have some relationship officially with state agencies and the higher education institutions, four-year universities, colleges, and community colleges. We do not have any particular relationship with our political subdivisions other than what we might create by separate statute and business relationships. But because we are an enterprise account as opposed to for funding purposes as opposed to a general fund account, we in our statute have the authority to assess those folks who benefit from our program, which means the applicants that we certify, our state agencies and higher ed institutions, as well as political subdivisions, whom we charge a fee. We have that fiscal connectivity with over 400 political subdivisions. And so we have a very interesting relationship with our political subdivisions, even though by statute our political subdivisions are not required to report to us in the way that our state agencies and educational institutions are. But our mission for our state agencies and educational institutions is, as you see here on the slide, is to create a competitive and fair business environment for both contracting and procurement opportunities that includes small businesses that are owned by minority women and socially and economically disadvantaged persons. That is OMWBE's mission prior to I-200, and it remains our mission in a post-I-200 environment. Very significant. Prior to I-200, preferential goals were allowed under our statute, which was Revised Code of Washington 3919, to remedy underrepresentation. However, the word preference or preferential goals, you won't see that in the statute, but they were allowed, and in fact, at local jurisdiction level, some of their programs were indeed preference programs. But after I-200, and that is codified not in our statute, but in the statutes of our Human Rights Commission under RCW 49-6400, which is very significant. And the language is virtually identical to your Proposition 209. We know that it prohibits preferential treatment on the basis of race or gender in public contracting. It's significant that it's not in OMWBE statute. And it's also significant that this initiative is just another statute alongside of OMWBE statute. It was not an amendment to the state constitution, unlike Proposition 209. And so therefore, the challenge of the state when the initiative was passed and it became another state statute was to harmonize this new statute along with existing statutes. That was our challenge. Probably most of the folks who voted for or against that initiative did not appreciate that. Indeed, many of the calls we got after the passage of I-200, those folks did not appreciate that. But that is what enabled us to move forward and to continue OMWBE's program in many respects. Today, still, preference and preferential treatment are still undefined. So what did I-200 remove from state law? If anybody was using mandatory goals, can't do that, of course. Cannot reject low bidders that do not meet goals. Price preferences or points that would be based on race or gender, etc., can't do that. You cannot consider race, gender, color, ethnicity in the selection of awards. We know all of that is prohibited under state law by virtue of I-200. But what it did not remove, because it was just another statute, it did not impact OMWBE's statute. That meant, naturally then, that OMWBE continued to have a certification program. It meant that OMWBE's outreach and recruitment of minority and women small businesses remained intact. It meant that we would be able to continue to establish and set voluntary goals for our minority and women certified firms. And it meant that we had the authority and indeed the duty to identify and remove barriers to equitable participation in contracting and procurement. And it also meant that our duty to report and monitor the utilization of minority and women firms remained. So how did we move forward? Because it was really a dark time after the passage of I-200, because most people thought that it would be implemented just like Proposition 209. They really didn't appreciate what the initiative actually said. Fortunately, the governor at the time, Gary Locke, issued Directive 9801 immediately, reinforcing the elements of OMWBE's statute, which allowed and sent a message. So we had from the executive, top executive of the state, saying, no, we are moving forward. And since then, Governor Gregoire, in her memo to state agencies in July of 2006, when she saw that agencies were languishing in terms of their efforts to utilize minority and women small businesses, were really not achieving what they could be, issued a very specific memo to state agencies to do better. And then in September of 2009, again, Governor Gregoire had her chief of staff issued a memo reiterating and reinforcing her commitment to supplier diversity. These are very important steps and very essential steps to have executive commitment at the highest level if supplier diversity is going to succeed certainly in the state of Washington. And then we also were able, through the legislature, to elevate what OMWBE had in regulation with the passage of House Bill 1087 in 2009, a clear statement from the legislature, which means a consensus across the state that OMWBE's duty and authority to require agencies to report expenditures would be a statutory requirement. It had always been in regulation, but this sent a message that legislators were keenly interested in what the agencies were doing. And in fact, they wanted a list of the names and contact people from each agency so they could contact them if they wanted to know individually from an agency how an agency was performing and progressing with supplier diversity. So what is supplier diversity? This is really a rebranding of OMWBE's program. We no longer message our program as affirmative action. It is that proactive commitment to business relationships that provide contracting access to the same database of minority and women small business that we did prior to I-200, frankly. And the goal is really a process improvement whereby there is access for all suppliers to provide value-added product to the state. Now, we're going to skip over the next slides here, Julia, 11 through 14, I believe, yes, and move on to OMWBE's programs, because Tim has told me that certification is of interest to folks here. And OMWBE since 1988 has been, or was, by statute, the sole certifying authority for all state agencies and local jurisdictions of minority and women and socially and economically disadvantaged businesses in the state of Washington. After the passage of I-200, and in an effort by local jurisdictions to make sure they did not run afoul of Initiative 200, they set up individual programs for small businesses, economically disadvantaged businesses. They set up self-identified type businesses, programs for all types and kinds and sorts of different businesses that were around the perimeters of OMWBE's statutory authority. Many of them are self-identified types of programs. So while we retain the authority that we have in statute, we have a number of these other kinds of programs, many of which I say are self-identified, but we work in collaboration with them. But we still, as we are the largest database for minority and women small businesses in the state of Washington, and because of the benefits that we provide, even though we still operate under a voluntary goal situation. Thankfully, because government, state agencies, and educational institutions have begun to embrace supplier diversity, even though we are in a voluntary goal setting, the firms themselves see that certification is of benefit to them, both in the public sector and then in the private sector as well. The fact that we have an electronic database online is quite beneficial to our firms. So OMWBE is, number one, the firm's resource inside government. for purposes of policy and program development. And not only is that through OMWBE, but that is through OMWBE's Ad Hoc Advisory Committee. We do firm referrals to agencies for their solicitations, hold a number of outreach events. We are a member of, as the slide says, CPARB, and that is the acronym for the Capital Projects Alternative Public Works Board, and that is a very significant board made up of stakeholders in the construction arena, general contractors, specialty contractors, labor, all of whom review all of the public works in alternative works arena before it goes to the legislature. So the fact that OMWBE has a seat at that table representing minority and women businesses is very significant. We also administer the Linked Deposit Program, which is a program of financing assistance to our certified firms. So even if you never do business with a public entity, you theoretically are eligible for this benefit, which is a reduction of up to 2% on the interest rate you pay for your commercial financing, merely because you are certified with OMWBE. And that has been hugely successful for our certified firms, particularly in the last 3 years when, as you all know, banks have not been lending. But thankfully, banks here in Washington, and particularly a couple, have been very aggressive and have continued to loan to our firms. Now, the program does not change the lending criteria. They have to meet traditional loan criteria, but these banks understand that our firms are capable, qualified, and of course, what do the banks get out of it? They meet their CRA credits. They get the public deposits into their banks, and so it is a win-win situation for the banks, and this has proved very successful for our firms. And then, of course, we also do some entrepreneurial training for our firms. And so these are the benefits that the firms get. Okay, so continuing on, we do a certain amount of marketing and opportunity matchmaking, as I mentioned, with the public entities and with corporate America. We do business planners. I'm sure you do the same thing down there, where we try and connect our state agency buyers and our firms very specifically with upcoming opportunities. These I recommend highly because every time I see firms connecting with buyers and walking out at the end of sessions with opportunities that they would have never known of had they not attended those events. And I mentioned previously our online directory, hugely beneficial, something we never imagined would be so successful for our firms in the private sector. Finally, we do customized vendor searches at no charge, and this is something that is very popular with our primes in the private sector. We also provide technical assistance to our state agencies. This is very important if we want them to succeed and meet their voluntary goals. So we're working with them to make sure that their solicitation and contract language does not contain any explicit or implicit barriers. We work with them to review and implement their supplier diversity plans, which are required by regulation. We work with them to establish their project and annual goals. We sit on any procurement sourcing teams that they may have. It's very helpful. And of course, we also help them develop customized vendor lists. So all of this, when we are working and being the bridge between agencies and the firms, enables firms to have better access to these contracting opportunities. And so if I can, in conclusion, And our last slide talks about some best practices that support minority and women small businesses in a voluntary goal setting. We see outlined here executive commitment, not only from the governor's office, but within each agency. And each agency, that means not only does it have to be exhibited in individual employees' performance development plans, it means that the agencies are reporting to the governor on a quarterly basis. We have government management and accounting reports that we have to provide quarterly. They include supplier diversity as one of the elements. This is very important. OMWBE publishes quarterly reports of the agency utilization. We post that online for the community and everyone to see. Extremely important. Of course, we do an annual report. We and the statewide database of vendors that is maintained by our central service agency, Department of Enterprise Services, now requires agencies to post all of their solicitations over $5,000 in there. And now that database identifies our certified firms as such, gives the certified firms much more visibility along with our database. So we have some central databases for the buyers to go to that is easy and convenient for them to identify firms. We, of course, at OMWBE also post particular procurements on our website. So there's no excuse for either buyers or firms not to know about upcoming opportunities. But the key is, of course, to identify and communicate profitable opportunities. And that's what OMWBE is about filtering through the maze of hundreds and thousands of opportunities and finding the profitable ones. And that's where OMWBE adds value. We also assist in establishing the project participation goals. Really, your program will come of age when you know you are succeeding in a voluntary goal setting. And when the California delegation was here, I introduced them to two of our agencies who are really the shining stars of the MWBE program, where they are using all of the resources and tools that we have available to them, and we are trying to model their experience with the other agencies, because I don't want to leave you with the impression that the state of Washington is hugely successful. It is not. We are struggling. We have pockets of success, but the two agencies that I showcased for them have embraced and used fully our tools that allow us to show that when we use the tools of making sure that we do targeted outreach, that we enter all our data into a database, we can establish objective project and annual goals, and we not only meet those goals, but we exceed them. And we have two agencies that have been doing that consecutively for over 5 years each. And that is the model that, as I said, we want other agencies to replicate. And then finally, of course, we have to measure, monitor, report, and celebrate results. That is what our OMWBE Ad Hoc Advisory Committee helps us with, and that is what becomes a real motivation, not only for OMWBE, but for the firms, as well as the agency and the community. So that, I think, Tim, probably puts me over my time limit.
Thank you very much, Cathy. It's very, very interesting, and I learn more each time I hear you explain this. So it's, I think it's a very, very helpful, and thank you very much. And we're going to start off now with our. I know there was at least one hand raised. We're going to ask the person to just hold their question for a bit, and we're going to move to our panelists, respondents, and people who went to Washington. And just a quick thing, Andrew, if you might need to redial into the phone number. Your phone is not showing up on my screen, so I'm not sure if I can get you participating here. So you might need to redial in the PIN number and everything. So we're going to start with Kecia and Debra. Maybe we'll start with Kecia Washington, who's the Director of the Office of Economic and Business Policy for Los Angeles. Kind of what was most striking to you about the program and the trip to Washington State?
Hi, thanks for having me, and thanks again, Tim, for allowing us to participate. For me, it was real interesting, one, to see someone who's been subject to a Prop 209 type program. One of the most interesting pieces for me is the fact that it wasn't, in fact, done as part of their constitutional amendment, but actually as not an ordinance, but as a statute. The first question out of my mind was obviously, well, why can't you get that statute changed? But I think that's a discussion for later on. But at least if they've got some flexibility in terms of some of the programs they're able to do, I think I was probably most excited about the programs, the link deposit program, and the fact that they recognize some of the best practices that we're trying in the city, which is executive commitment. If we're able to get the folks at the top to understand the value that diversity brings, and the fact that when you're trying to get someone other than, I guess, the main folks, or to kind of expand your horizons or your fishing pool, that you're not decreasing the skill set that folks are bringing to the table. You're not decreasing the product or the quality of the product or the good, but in fact you're able to bring in new perspectives, new ways of attacking the problem that you're trying to do normally when you hire someone. When you contract with a business for a good or a service, you're saying, I've got a problem, business owner, I need you to help me fix that. And again, with diversity, I think that you're able to achieve that. And the fact that you get folks to commit at top levels and all the way down, it recognizes the fact there is no one way of doing it, and you open their minds to that.
Thanks, Kecia. And Debra Fischle-Faulk, who's the Director of Administration for San Diego, would you like to also say what was most striking to you?
Oh, certainly, and thank you, Tim, for having me and for allowing me to go up to Washington and see their program. I think when I looked at that question, the first thing that struck me was the name, the Office of Minority and Women Business Enterprises. That never went away. In California, we all tried to step back from saying minority and women businesses because for fear of running afoul of Prop 209. And I think that was striking to me that they kept the integrity of the name, and it was pretty exciting to see. They had voluntary goals and everything, but they did not. When you look at the California Department of Transportation, it's now called the Office of Business and Economic Opportunity. And I really was encouraged and was struck by the fact that not only did they keep the name of Office of Minority and Women Business Enterprises, the top levels actually re-emphasized that, no, we're still committed to doing this, which I thought was phenomenal. Much of what Kecia said I wholeheartedly concur with, and I also was struck by the link deposit program. I think that's an excellent program and an excellent way to assist firms with the economic challenges they're facing now.
Thanks, Debra. And Andrew Houston, the Contracts Compliance Officer for the City of San Francisco.
Sure. Thanks, Tim. Yeah, just to echo some of what the ladies mentioned is, yeah, I mean, definitely having that support on the executive level coming in from Governor Gregoire was very inspiring. You know, obviously in California, obviously last governor, we were so far away from that. And current governor hasn't made that commitment, at least publicly, that it was really inspiring to kind of see that. But not only that, but to have the buy-in from the people who implement these programs. So people like Cathy and, Cheska and Frank and all these other folks, who are involved in either supporting or implementing these programs. It's one thing to have the executive support, but I guess the people who report to the executive, they also have to buy in too. And so we also saw that buy-in, which was also, very, very inspiring, that everybody kind of who implemented these programs seemed to be on the same page. So whether it was the University of Washington or the state of Washington or the Port of Seattle or all the different jurisdictions that kind of have these programs, they were all kind of in sync, and I feel like that's something that we necessarily don't have in California, with everybody in sync, trying to go for the goal of increasing MWBE participation. And I also would say that not only that, but it also makes us think about the future of California, and when we have governors and other politicians going for office, really asking them for their commitment to MWBE programs and increasing the MWBE participation, because, and I mentioned this on the trip, is that it's hard to have them make that commitment on the back end. If they already kind of have that on their mind, when they're kind of going forward, then it's easier than kind of asking them or begging them to do it on the back end. So I think on the front end, those are things that really in other states and jurisdictions as well that we should start thinking about. And lastly, I would just say that another thing that was very striking, not only was it the kind of the buy-in across the board and the commitment, but as Cathy kind of mentioned and some other folks, they really weren't afraid to kind of put race and gender on the table. As Debra kind of mentioned, we're kind of, for some odd reason, kind of scared to talk about it here in California. And so I thought it was very impressive that they weren't afraid to put both race and gender on the table and kind of not shy away from it.
Great, and I think we already answered some of this next question, but what do you think are some of the things that could be implemented within, by the state of California or local governments here, of something that you saw? And maybe we'll start with Debra on this question.
Yeah, thank you. I really think that it is impressive and shows a level commitment when the governor comes out and says that they are supportive of developing and awarding contracts to minority and women-owned business, even if it's on a voluntary basis. And I think that's a significant gap here in California. As Andrew said, our prior governor wasn't on that page, and our current governor hasn't gotten there yet. But I think that would be a real critical piece for California.
Andrew, would you like to answer that one?
Sure. Yeah, and I think some other people touched upon it, but I think that the leak deposit program is really good. And so, for folks who don't know who it is, it's really, the state of Washington's commitment to, provide funding for the MWBEs. And I guess, folks could kind of Google it and look it up online to get, more detailed information. But I think that's really key because, a lot of the MWBEs, partly because they're not getting the work that they should get, is that they don't have the capital to kind of, start their business or maintain their business. And so, it's no secret that, money plays a big factor in maintaining your business and starting your business. And so I think that link deposit program is something that is really, really good in the state of Washington, and that definitely, could be shadowed in jurisdictions.
Kecia?
One of the other ideas that I like, and it's something that we're doing somewhat in the city of LA, is the concept of providing buyers as well as primes with a database of firms that are able, willing to do the work that they need done. There's a challenge now with the state because the state has gone to a small business program, which I'm actually okay with in theory. The challenge is two things. One, they're not doing anything to verify or to give folks the opportunity to say that you are, in fact, a certified woman or minority-owned business. And I personally have a bias against folks who raise their hands and say they're blue without proving to me that they're blue, and I'm going to refer them to someone else. The other challenge is with respect to there are different databases across the state rather. For example, the city, we've created a fishing pool where we've got about 40,000 businesses registered to do business with the city, and I give you the option of saying that you are certified as pink or purple, but we go back and verify. But we're able to provide this list when we tell folks that we expect them to outreach to small businesses, but we also expect you to outreach to women and minorities, because I think what folks are forgetting is even though Prop 209 says we cannot have preferential treatment, there is nothing that says you cannot require outreach to everyone. And the way that the city has gotten around that is we require outreach to women, minorities, and other business enterprises. And when you do that, I can guarantee you that if there is a woman or a minority-owned business in that particular NAICS code, that they will be outreached to. Now, what they do with it from there becomes a challenge. How do you really evaluate good faith? But at least I know they're going to be spoken to and that someone's going to have to seriously consider them. Something like that, there's nothing stopping the rest of us in California from doing it. I agree with what Andrew said earlier, is that, and also what Debra said, we are scared in California, or we have backed away from saying women and minority. We don't have to be. We can continue to say, you know, you have to outreach to. We just can't say you must award to, but there are other ways of getting around that with the small business program. So if you're able to marry the two and you guarantee the outreach occurs, and one of the ways you do that is you create that database so folks know where to find them. One of the complaints we used to always get is, I don't know where a good firm is that does X, Y, or Z. Now we're telling them, we got a list. Let me help you find it.
Thanks. Thanks, Kecia. And then we're going to just give a chance to Cathy to maybe give any responses to so far, and as well as any panelists can, you know, respond to something another panelist has said. So, Cathy, do you have anything to add at this point?
Well, I think just to echo the comments about the importance of having a database, and a presence. I typed a message in here. I don't know if everybody saw it, but Governor Gregoire always has been very accessible to our minority and women business advocacy groups. That means that she is listening to them, and so they feel they have access. But then aside from that, OMWBE, as I mentioned, you know, we have that vetted database. And people have, over the years, over the 28 years that we have been in business, it has gained some, hopefully some credibility in the public and private sector. And as, you know, we've come to see what has happened with self-identification programs, it's gained added prominence. And so we want to protect that, because we don't want businesses out there that are not licensed and doing things, you know, like the underground economy. And so you really need to promote that, you know, having a vetted database of firms is of value to the state. And this is where, you know, the minority and women business community needs to get on board and come together and say, you know, we are capable and qualified, and we are not afraid of showing our credentials, and come to the state buyers or the local jurisdiction buyers and say, we are capable, and we are not afraid to display our credentials. And sometimes there is that reticence to do that for a variety of reasons, but there can't be. You can't get any financing or bonding, and so why, you know, you've got to step out at some point in time.
Thanks, Cathy. And finally, our last question for our panelists, and this is stated in the spirit of, as Cathy mentioned, that it's really a mutual learning thing, and that both the people in Washington as well as the visitors from California were learning from each other. But I want to kind of get a little more specific to our three panelists to ask them if they have been thinking about anything, you know, specifically within their own program that they might want to add or they might want to change following their trip to Washington. So, Andrew, we're going to start with you on this question. So.
Sure. You know, I mean, a couple of things. One in particular, and I think I kind of picked this up from Kecia from Los Angeles, was that it seems like in Los Angeles what they're doing that actually will really be very helpful here in San Francisco and probably other jurisdictions is that, you know, she's kind of forcing folks to say why they didn't pick minority businesses and women-owned businesses. And I guess that's something I never really thought about. I kind of just looked at it as, you know, they do their good faith outreach and they don't pick them, but they never really give a justification of why they didn't choose them. In addition, you know, even before that point is that they have to outreach to a certain percentage of minority and women-owned businesses too. And again, that's something that, you know, here in San Francisco that I never really kind of looked at it from that lens because, you know, within the confines of 209 and probably even I-200 in California, there's really nothing stopping you from doing that. And so, you know, I think that kind of, you know, holds them a little bit more accountable as to, you know, why not, and even maybe even why. And if we get reasons why they did choose folks, that could help us, you know, maybe strengthen the folks who didn't get chosen. And so, you know, that's one thing that really stuck out to me when I was out there and I was listening to all the folks talk from all the different, you know, states and jurisdictions, is that you know, we have to start getting to the root cause of why minority and women businesses aren't getting chosen. You know, maybe there's similar issues, maybe, you know, there's different issues for different types of trades and whatnot. And so, you know, other than, you know, obviously, you know, just blanket racism and prejudice and things of that nature, you know, we want to get to the root causes of why folks weren't chosen.
Thanks, Kecia.
I think the program that I'm going to try to steal is the link deposit program. And what I'm looking at, the city of LA, is we are essentially an economy unto ourselves. And I'm looking at how much we spend annually and how much we bank annually. And I think we've got a responsible banking ordinance, but I really want to take it to the next level. I like the concept. If I'm going to put my money there, if the city's going to put their money there, what is the return on investment to businesses in the city? Again, I think our challenge is going to be, I don't know if we're going to be able to do it with minorities, but given the diversity in the city of Los Angeles, I really want to see what they're going to say to a proposal that says, we're going to put money here. We expect you to lend out a certain percentage to businesses within the city. And given the diversity here, let's see what it looks like. And that's my next task.
Debra.
I have two. I also am looking at the link deposit. I think that's a longer challenge to implement because I have to deal with our finance people and all that kind of stuff. But it is, I thought it was an incredible programmatic element that I would like to replicate in San Diego. And the second thing is I liked the change agent that was in Washington's program. So I'm actually in the process of recommending some improvements to the city's small local business program. And one of them is that the mayor's going to require a champion in each department that helps, because there's, you know, 5 of my staff members doing this and thousands of employees that are involved in the procurement process. And so I am proposing, and the mayor's bought off on it, so I just have to do all the things behind it, having a management level person in each department as a champion of minority, women, small local businesses through the city, and they help us promote and implement our program. And so it's sometimes my battles are within. And so I'm trying to minimize those battles and have a champion in each group that helps us through that.
Great. Thanks, Debra. And I think now at this point, unless any of you have any last follow-ups, we'll move to the audience at large. Any last responses? I think that's good, and it's really interesting to hear all of you talk about some of those specific things. And I think there's one of the real values of a trip like this is it helps you think about specific things in your own program that can change. So there's several people with questions. I know. I think that Elena, Anaya, your phone right now is not connected, so you may need to either redial in or just type in your question in the questions box. I know you were the first one with your hand up, but I'm not getting a signal with your phone there. So I know that Celeste Metcalf, who's with the state of Missouri, had a question. Just one second. Okay, Celeste, your phone is unmuted now. Are you there? Celeste Metcalf, are you there? If not, I will ask let's see. Celeste was asking, I think this might be a question for Cathy, but basically when you're on a goals environment, and the goal is based on a disparity study, and you have to stay within the confines of basically the findings of the disparity study. But what happens then within a voluntary program like you have in the state of Washington when a contract is awarded to a minority or women-owned firm? How do people challenge that? Is that ever challenged in court, like why a certain contract goes up on a prime basis to one of those, to a diverse firm? Like how do you say, like, is it a best value type of situation, or how do you overcome those types of challenges?
Well, that's the beauty of a voluntary goal program, is that the award is not a condition of award. So there are no challenges. The board is not based on race or gender or ethnicity, any of those prohibited categories as per our statute now, and indeed there have been no challenges. But for purposes of setting goals either on a project or on an annual basis, we use essentially the same criteria, not as sophisticated as you might find that might be outlined in a full-blown disparity study. And they're set in our regulation and supplemented by other factors. But essentially we're using the same elements of availability, upcoming opportunities, past performance, when an agency will look at setting goals for a particular project. Does that answer your question?
I hope it does, and if it hasn't answered it, Celeste, if you can type in a follow-up question, we can ask that. So Elena Naya has a question about the linked deposit program, and which banks specifically are part of that program.
Elena, and all of you can go on OMWBE's website, and that's our acronym, OMWBE.wa.gov. And on our homepage, you can click on Linked Deposit Program under Financing, and then you'll see a drop-down for Linked Deposit Program, and there will be a list of participating banks, banks that have participated over the years in the Linked Deposit Program. Some are more active than others, and some are nationwide. I was going to make a comment to the ladies, Kecia and Debra, that they will be your greatest supporters. You want to align with them if you want to move that initiative to San Diego and Los Angeles, because they have been our greatest supporters here in Washington for the program. Okay? I can use those names specifically if you want to call me about who you might want to tap, the banks in San Diego and LA that have offices there.
That'd be great, Cathy. Thank you.
Advocacy.
Thanks, Cathy. And I know Colette Holt had a question earlier, and I'll give you a chance, Colette. I unmuted your phone if you have a kind of a follow-up question about the linked deposit program or something else here. So.
Oh, thanks, Tim. No, I was curious about the qualification for the linked deposit program, because it sounded like it really was, in fact, a race and gender conscious preference, and it may, in fact, be. The only thing I'd add is that the state of Maryland has had an excellent linked deposit program for, it's probably at least a decade. So people could contact them if you want information about how that worked and what their successes have been. When we did the disparity study for Maryland, OMWBE spoke very highly of the program and said that they thought they had actually benefited from it.
Colette, early on, or not too long after the passage of Initiative 200, we had a Attorney General opinion to address that issue of whether the link deposit program was be prohibited by Initiative 200, and it was determined that it wasn't a contracting program, it was a financing program, and so therefore it didn't violate Initiative 200.
Oh, I see. Okay, well that makes sense, and believe me, I'm not saying don't do it. You know, my theory is do what you can do until somebody tells you to stop.
Exactly, but no, we got in there early to you know, dispel those kinds of concerns.
Right. I think California Prop 209 has a broader reach.
Yes.
So that might be much more of a problem. But you know, Maryland had Prop 209 or Initiative 200 or anything, and has an extremely aggressive program. You know, probably the best state program in the country. And their link deposit program really is ostensibly race and gender neutral. Other small firms can participate, but they do particular outreach to the certified firms, and so then there really doesn't seem to have been a problem to broaden the eligibility of it in terms of its effectiveness and reach into the minority and women business community. So for California, that might be more of a way to go than, you know, why take on a problem you don't have to have if we can make it work anyway.
In Washington, our link deposit program has been extended to veteran businesses, if that's a help.
Yeah. Oh, I would think it probably would be, but right. I mean, it's got a different reach. So, but I'm just saying that at least in Maryland, which has a real, honest-to-God, traditional OMWBE, you know, they've managed to make it race and gender neutral, and it's still been pretty successful.
Yeah, that's great.
All right, thanks, both of you. And we have time for one last question before we need to wrap this up from Amy Richardson, and I've unmuted your phone, Amy.
Yes, thank you. And first, I'd like to congratulate Cathy. It sounds like they're doing a good job there in the state of Washington with all the challenges that have come to bear. But I'm curious to know and what resources the state makes available to you in terms of, you know, for staffing and, you know, as a percentage of the state budget. What does that look like for the Office of Minority and Women Business Enterprises?
That's where the rubber meets the road, of course.
Yeah.
We have a very small budget, biennial budget of $3.8 million. We're budgeted for 17 staff. We aren't filling that at the moment because of budgetary restrictions, and I'll just leave it at that. Even though we're authorized for that, we haven't authorized to spend all of our money, and I guess every state has that, can identify with that kind of issue. So we are statewide. We don't just do certification. As I mentioned, we do agency support and business development. So we do a number of things with the 14 folks that we have here. A large percentage of our effort is devoted to publishing the quarterly expenditure reports of 117 agencies and educational institutions, and that means that we're reviewing 1 million records quarterly, and then for an annual report, and that's a huge effort for this small agency, which is running on legacy systems from the 1990s. So we could use lots of system upgrades up here, but we do what we can.
Thanks, Cathy, and thanks, Amy, for the question. And I want to thank all of our presenters, Cathy, as well as Kecia, Debra, and Andrew. I think it's been a very interesting and helpful webinar, and we will have a recording of the webinar on our website within, hopefully by Monday or Tuesday, and it will be basically, it's in the form of a YouTube video is the way that you can watch it or share it with someone else who was not able to participate in the webinar. And I believe we can work out with Cathy of getting copies of the PowerPoint slide presentation too, if anyone would like a copy of that. presentation. I think it could be very helpful. So thanks all as well to everyone in the audience, and it's been a very responsive and interested audience. So with that, thank you very much all.
Bye-bye.